Hello again. We've already covered the WCW side of the Monday Night Wars. Just as they got an early lead over the WWF in TV ratings, they had a head start when it came to video games as well, due to their partnership with THQ and AKI. The WWF, on the other hand, hung on to their long-standing relationship with Acclaim, which, to wrestling fans, seemed more like wrongful imprisonment. Let's return to 1998 for a moment. If you were a WWF fan, then you were playing this when you really wanted to be playing this. There's just no comparison. When it came to video games, the WCW took the mantle. But the tide of the Monday Night Wars was changing every month. Though the NWO had struck an early blow to the WWF's TV ratings, the WWF would launch a major renovation of its product in the late 1990s, culminating in the birth of The Rock, the Generation X, and the Corporation. The WWF was closing in fast on the WCW, and just as it continued to shed the associations of its former squeaky clean image, it had to break ties with whatever else was holding it back. Acclaim, who had produced far too many mediocre wrestling games, was clearly a weak link in the chain. The WWF saw the success of World Tour and Revenge and wanted a taste of it. So, in what was the largest coup in wrestling game history, the WWF made a deal with THQ in 1999 and brought AKI's revolutionary wrestling engine to WWF fans for the first time. In October, THQ published its first game under the WWF license, WWF WrestleMania 2000. In the last video, I explained how the game engine works by dividing your moves into strikes and throws. The system is easy to use, yet presents a lot of depth to the player. In WrestleMania 2000, the formula remains unchanged, but there are some added features. You can perform more double-team moves for 2-on-1 situations, and the overall move list has been expanded with more slams and submissions. Another notable addition is that wrestlers walk out to the ring to their music while the Titantron runs a video in the background. It's a small touch, but it goes a long way in making WrestleMania 2000 more true to life. There is no championship circuit per se, but they've added a slew of new modes in its place. In the pay-per-view mode, you assume the role of a WWF booker and plan your own event. You can schedule matches, create custom titles, and watch the whole pay-per-view play out. The tournament function from World Tour makes a return as the King of the Ring mode, and the Battle Royale from Revenge is now the 30-man Royal Rumble. They've added a cage match too, where the goal is to climb over the fence to win. The main feature of the game is Road to WrestleMania, where you select a WWF superstar and take them through a storyline to win a title shot at WrestleMania. You'll develop rivalries as the game proceeds, and along the way you'll unlock hidden wrestlers like Shawn Michaels, Cactus Jack, and Dude Love. Speaking of the roster, unlike World Tour and Revenge, WrestleMania 2000 features no wrestlers from outside the WWF. I like how AKI focuses the effort on WWF talent, but overall I still prefer Revenge for the number of legends on board. To me, the most interesting feature is the Edit mode, which boasted the most thorough Create-A-Wrestler editor of its time. Like Revenge, you can still customize each wrestler's ring attire, but this time around you can create new wrestlers from scratch. The first time you glance at the move list, you really get an appreciation for the depth of WrestleMania 2000. There are hundreds of striking techniques, slams, and holds to choose from, giving you total control over your wrestler's playstyle. You can even select your character's taunts. If you're meticulous about your choices, you can expect the whole process to take at least half an hour to complete. It's a great feeling at the end of it, though, to see all your moves coming to life in the ring. You can take your wrestlers through the Road to WrestleMania mode and win the championship, or you can make the ultimate jobber and squash them as you see fit. Rags to Riches success story or an also-ran. It's your choice. WrestleMania 2000 was followed by the January 2000 release of Virtual Pro Wrestling 2 in Japan. As with World Tour and VPW, there are some differences between WrestleMania 2000 and VPW 2 in the presentation and the match types. The roster features a mixed bag of Puroresu legends like Mitsuharu Misawa, Kenta Kobashi, and Giant Baba, and Gaijin wrestlers like Vader and Stan Hansen. There are over 100 wrestlers total, so even if you have no interest in Japanese wrestling, VPW 2 is bound to have a wrestler that suits you. They've refined the engine to include running grapple moves, which allows you to execute face crushers and neck breakers off a running start. Also, the striking combinations, which were omitted from WrestleMania 2000, make a return in VPW 2. One of my favorite features is the ability to switch rule sets at the beginning of a singles match. You can have a standard wrestling match with pinfalls, or pick shoot fighting rules and have an MMA match. In shoot fighting mode, you can score takedowns and go for submission holds on the ground. There's a basic grappling system that allows you to maintain dominant position, and unleash ground and pound on your opponent, soften them up and latch onto an armbar or choke. You can actually think of this as a precursor to the MMA games that started appearing on next-gen consoles. The shoot fighting mode would seem out of place in WrestleMania 2000 due to the difference in wrestling culture, but in VPW2 it's a perfect fit. The story mode from WrestleMania 2000 is replaced by Royal Road Succession. As you make your way through the calendar, you'll have opportunities to wrestle and unlock hidden characters like Bruiser Brody and Andre the Giant. You'll probably notice right away that the presentation is different in VPW2. The elaborate entrances from WrestleMania 2000 have been omitted, and instead you'll get a cutscene of your wrestler leaving his locker room and entering the ring. There are no flashy pyrotechnics or crowd-pleasing stunts, but you won't really miss them. It's a different atmosphere and feels more like a sport than a spectacle. You'll even have a ring announcer introduce your wrestler to the audience. The one thing I like most about VPW2 is the sheer depth of the roster. And it's not just the number of wrestlers, it's the variety, as if AKI had concentrated the entire essence of Japanese wrestling into one game. Even today, VPW2 stands as one of the most popular Nintendo 64 import games. And if it all ended there for AKI, it would have been a valiant last effort. But they still had one more WWF title planned for the Nintendo 64, and it would be a good one. WWF No Mercy was released in November of 2000 to widespread critical acclaim. The final WWF game on the Nintendo 64, AKI made certain to cram No Mercy full of features, complete with an improved story mode, a renovated Create-A-Wrestler editor, and new gameplay options. There are 52 initial wrestlers, with notable additions like Kurt Angle, the Dudley Boys, and Right to Censor. The women's division has grown too since WrestleMania 2000, which is great because it was an important time in the WWF for the Divas. There are also several unlockable wrestlers like Shawn Michaels, Ken Shamrock, and Andre the Giant. Come to think of it, this is the second game in a row where Andre has been unlockable. Must have been the year of the Giant. The wrestling engine still feels and plays the same way, but AKI made some necessary changes for the extra features. The running grapple system from VPW2 reappears in No Mercy, and there's one other game mechanic that's been transferred over. Whenever you grapple with a super heavyweight like Rikishi, your character will strain to lift them up and slam them. If you manage to do it, you'll earn a big bonus to your spirit meter, but if you fail, you'll stagger backwards and suffer penalty to your stamina. In VPW2, the only wrestler affected by this mechanic was Andre the Giant, but in No Mercy, several wrestlers are designated as super heavyweights, so you'll run across this feature more often than you would in VPW2. It helps to make the matches more realistic, as there's not much sense in having a light heavyweight suplex Rikishi around the ring like a ragdoll. No Mercy features more match types than ever before. One new addition is the ladder match, where the goal is to climb a ladder and capture the title belt hanging from above. There's also a guest referee mode, survival mode, cage matches, and oh yeah, you can have legitimate hardcore matches now. If you drag your opponent backstage, you can brawl in the locker room, the bar, and the loading bay. There are a ton of weapons lying around, so you can take your pick from pool cues, chairs, signs, and sledgehammers, and slam your opponents into walls and through tables. One time I even suplexed my opponent into a fire extinguisher. The world of PG wrestling is just not prepared for that kind of violence. The main attraction is the Championship mode, which is an expanded version of the Road to WrestleMania feature from WrestleMania 2000. As with the previous game, the goal is to take your wrestlers up the ranks en route to a title shot, but you can make decisions along the way that will either simplify or complicate your path. So how does it work? Well, once you select the title belt, you enter an interactive storyline that is divided into separate chapters. Every chapter puts your wrestler in a match against a predetermined opponent, sometimes with special stipulations like hardcore handicap or fatal four-way. Each storyline usually breaks into multiple paths, meaning that the ultimate outcome will depend on the choices you make. There's a lot of variety in the match types, and your opponents will present a good deal of challenge. So once you start your storyline, you're in for a hell of a ride. You may notice that you're accruing money at the end of each match. Sometimes your money can be spent during championship mode, but whatever you have left at the end of the storyline is transferred to your general bank, which can be used to make purchases from the shop. The shop feature is new to No Mercy, by the way. Here you can purchase new outfits, moves, and wrestlers with the money you've earned in championship mode. It's an excellent complement to the recently revamped Create a Wrestler mode, which gives you more options for your wrestler's look and grappling style. When you combine the Create a Wrestler mode with the goodies you unlock from the shop, you end up with more ways to customize your wrestling experience than ever before. No Mercy is near perfect, but I do have some complaints. To begin with, you can't manage the difficulty in championship mode. This becomes especially problematic in the handicap matches, where you're forced to fend off 2 opponents at the same time. I understand handicap matches were an important part of WWF storytelling, but they're pretty tedious from a gameplay perspective. I should also point out that there's a glitch in the game that could potentially wipe all the save data from your cartridge. I'm not entirely sure what causes it, but most people seem to think it's related to using your custom wrestlers in the championship and survival modes. THQ sent out a revised edition of No Mercy with the glitch removed, but they're not as common on the secondhand market today. You gotta do a little hunting to come up with a copy. All things considered, No Mercy is, in my opinion, the best WWF game on the Nintendo 64, and one of the best of all time. The Monday Night Wars were winding down, with WCW tarnishing their reputation one stupid business decision after the other. It was pretty clear that the WWF would emerge the victor, so it's only fitting that they would find their best success while the WCW squandered away theirs. After the THQ split, the WCW was left with some rather mediocre titles. Meanwhile, the WWF ushered in a golden age of video games, culminating in the SmackDown series. It was the end of one era and the beginning of another, but while it lasted, the AKI THQ saga was a special time in wrestling game history. So how do these games hold up 15 years later? I still think they're a lot of fun to play and pretty addictive in multiplayer mode. Every one of the AKI THQ games supports up to 4 consecutive players, so you can mix it up and have hardcore matches or fatal 4-ways to your heart's content. Obviously, I would rank World Tour and VPW below the other games in the saga. Despite the fact that they were a huge improvement over WCW vs. The World, they're still a little rough around the edges. Between the two, VPW is clearly the superior choice. But if you already own a copy of World Tour, then I wouldn't suggest going through the trouble of importing VPW. They're close enough. Next on the list is Revenge for its gameplay innovations and championship mode. Unlike World Tour, Revenge actually seems like it's based on Western professional wrestling. It just feels truer to the WCW brand, and it also represents a monumental time in WCW programming. After Revenge, I've got WrestleMania 2000. WWF's first Nintendo 64 game was a strong one. It's an excellent game with a great Create a Wrestler editor. Just above WrestleMania 2000, I have VPW 2 and No Mercy tied for first. I can't choose between the two because I feel they represent the best of 2 different styles. No Mercy features more Western gimmicks like the ladder and the cage match, while VPW 2 delivers a more visceral wrestling experience. Honestly, you couldn't go wrong with both. And there you have it. I have them ranked chronologically because it seemed AKI fine-tuned the product every year. It's rare that a company will produce so many sequels and outdo itself every time. Modern studios need to take note of this. Anyway, that concludes part 2 of the AKI THQ Retrospective. This has been Wildfang for Retro Video Gamer, and I'd like to thank you for watching.